looks like the thing to do is to be a doctor.
The luminal side is progressing rapidly. So welcome to the next episode of Endoscopy Essentials. Today I'm very proud to have one of the international superstars, Douglas Rex from Indianapolis. Very welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Thomas. Glad to be with you.
We know each other for a long time, so we thought we should start with a person, Douglas Rex. I Googled you. You come from a smaller place called Ligonier, or how do you pronounce that?
That's pretty close, Thomas. Ligonier. Yeah, Ligonier. It's a little tiny town in the northeast of Indiana. There's actually a Ligonier in the state of Pennsylvania. And I believe there's a Ligonier in France. So
it sounds French.
It does sound French, mm-hmm. Yes. Very small town. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you grew up there? Were your parents doctors or in the medical business?
Yeah. So no, it was a very small town, very industrial town. Lots of factories, really more jobs in the town than there were people. A lot of people from the surrounding areas who would come in to work. My father was a carpenter. And my mother became a school teacher when I was in grade school to make some extra, money for the family. But I think I figured out when I was very young that the person who was kind of the most respected in the town was the doctor. And every year, there would be a celebration in the fall, and they would give a Citizen of the Year award. And usually the doctor got the Citizen of the Year award. And so I think I decided somewhere in my mind, it looks like the thing to do is to be a doctor. And so I pursued that.
And which type of industry was it at that time?
So there probably were 17 or 18 different factories. Indiana has and still has kind of a good situation with regard to taxes, and it's keeps a good balance in the state budget. So in the recessions that occurred, the recessions typically hit the RV industry, the recreational vehicle industry, which is very close to there. And I think Obama would come there twice when when a recession would start to sort of highlight that workers are out of work, because that's the first thing people stop buying is recreational vehicles. But companies that made plastic bottles, paper products, marshmallow cream, big flour mill company, a couple of companies that made parts for auto cars, like rubber, the pedals that you step on. So in the summertime, I would work in the factories. When I would come home at college, I never even worry about a job. Just would walk down to the factories, and they would immediately give you a job, put you right out on the line or doing some sort of work. And I usually worked in a different one. So I learned a lot about jobs I didn't want to have. Made me study harder to get into medical school.
But also, how people live and what their concerns are, because they finally end up to be your patients.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've definitely come from a middle class American family, sort of a lower income American family. So yeah, I totally get that side of things. Yeah.
And how is, if I may ask, how is the area doing nowadays? Are they in this well-known crisis, industrial crisis, or are they doing okay? Because they seem to be very, very diverse, what you described. Huh?
Yeah, they actually still doing really well. It's an interesting little town because in the United States, there have been, I know this has happened to some extent in Germany because of your migration. So in a little town like that that's industrial, they're always looking for workers. Mm-hmm. And so when I was a kid, they advertised very actively in Kentucky because in the eastern part of Kentucky, the coal mines were starting to give out. They weren't producing coal. And so there were a lot of people there without jobs. So there was a big influx of people coming from Kentucky. And then later, they moved that kind of advertising to the southern border. And so people coming across the border would come to Ligonier to work in the factories. So when I was a child, the town was basically 100% white and mostly WASP. There was a Catholic church also, and now the town is 59% Hispanic. Because of all the people coming to work in the factories, so there's still a lot of jobs there. And when you listen to our president, you would think we lost all of our industry, and of course we did lose a lot of it. Because of when NAFTA occurred, there was a strong incentive for lots and lots of factories to move out. But in this particular area, it's continued to do well. And I have my two best friends from high school still live on the farm that they grew up on, and they've raised their children. They have grandchildren there now, and so it was a very interesting choice for them. I think in many ways that's a really powerful way to live. You sort of grow up, you stay in one place, everybody. It's a wonderful sort of social thing. They go to church, and they go to the same church for many decades, which is also fantastic from a social standpoint and a support standpoint. And then you have all of your children and grandchildren around you, which is fantastic because, my kids have moved all over the country, and we're fortunate to have some grandchildren who are close to us. But, it's kind of two different ways, and I can see the nice parts of that,
Well, that's like history and industrial history in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So it seems that, you have the same priest for decades, you have the same doctor for decades.
Yeah, exactly.
And this brings us back to your medical career. Where did you study?
I went. I was an undergraduate at Harvard, and I did really well at Harvard. I graduated summa from Harvard. You would think I could have gone anywhere that I wanted to, and I didn't. I applied to 5 medical schools, and I got rejected by all of them except Indiana University. And I think, in retrospect, I don't know what the issue was. It was interesting at Harvard. I applied there, and I got interviewed 5 times. And finally, I went back 5 times. Finally, I went back for the 5th interview, and I said, can you tell me what's going on? and I think the problem was that I was pretty naive still, because I grew up in such a small town, and I thought being a doctor was my image of what the guy in my small town was. So people would say, well, what do you plan to do? And I would say, well, I'm just going to go out and practice and get married and have kids. And finally, with the 5th interview, the lady said to me, the problem is that the basic research people are saying you're not the kind of person that we want to train here at Harvard, and the clinical people are saying, you're a really solid guy, and we would like to have you. So we're getting positive reviews and very negative reviews, and that was kind of the first time I think I realized that even though I was at Harvard as an undergraduate, I didn't really get all the possibilities for medicine, and that was a reflection of just me growing up in a really small town. So then I went to my own state medical school. We only have one medical school in my state, and then of course there you finally get exposed to all the possibilities, and so then I decided eventually, of course, to go into GI. So yeah,
but. Here we have another nutshell, which is the old dilemma between the basic research people and the clinical people, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, to some extent, you managed to reconcile these two worlds, right? Because you have been doing a lot of research, clinical research, and that's very necessary to be taken seriously as a clinician. Because I think in Europe and probably in the US, all the money goes to basic research.
Yeah, right.
Funding.
Well, when I because when I was a medical resident, again, as you can imagine, I did really well as a medical resident, and I had a number of options about directions to go. And the people who were in charge, the head of the medicine department, really was very negative about the idea of becoming a gastroenterologist and going into practice. I can still remember him telling me, well, you don't want to just go out and set up an endoscopy shop. You need to stay here and make some contributions. And the guy who was my mentor in the program, who was Glenn Lehman, he felt, very strongly that what's interesting about medicine is to figure out some way to do research. So when my fellowship, I actually spent most of my time, in the bench doing research. And
which type of research?
Well, it was mostly protein chemistry on alcohol dehydrogenase. There was a big alcohol-related metabolism laboratory that was run by a guy named Ting Kai Lee. He was a very successful researcher. He headed the NIAA for a while. Eventually went to Washington and was kind of a national director. So he ran a big laboratory, and I had a niche in there, and I did well, and eventually joined the faculty with the plan to become a bench researcher, and applied for a grant. But in the U.S., it's probably the same everywhere. At any given time, there's more or less funding. Right now, the funding is being cut out in a crazy fashion. But so I got a good score on the grant, but it didn't get funded. And that was the point where, because I had the clinicians pulling at me, come and be a clinician, the bench people saying, no, don't. And
which is a nice situation to be wanted by two parties, isn't it?
It is. I think it's very tricky when you're in kind of a position of power because sometimes people in power will try very strongly to influence somebody to follow their path. And I think try to make somebody feel guilty if they choose the other way or to become a clinician. And I think the right way to do it is you want to help young people do what they are really passionate about and the direction that they
find out first
and to figure that out and to realize that they're very young and that they may they may change their minds. And I basically at that point I had two children, and I was here I had applied for this grant and I didn't get it, and I thought, this is just crazy. I mean, how am I going to make this work? And also I really loved clinical medicine. It probably goes back to watching the doctor in my hometown and going to the hospital with him and what I thought was being a doctor. And it wasn't, I sort of started to realize it wasn't being in a laboratory. And so I decided I'm done with that. I'm not going to worry about grants. And I joined the clinical side and, stay and have been happy there. That was the right direction for me. And I had to listen to the right people, listen to myself about really what I really wanted. Yeah.
Well, Glenn Lehman was one of your mentors. I knew him from early on because some of his guys like Rob Hawes, they got involved with endoscopic ultrasound.
Sure.
And but you were focusing on colonoscopy early on, or how?
Well, so part of it was because I can remember being on the second floor with you and Rob and Locke Teo in the same room doing endoscopic ultrasound. Moritz Wiersma was there, and you guys were talking to each other about anatomy and so on, and which was fabulous. It was right at the birth of endoscopic ultrasound. I think it was partly because I had so little time as a clinical fellow that my mentor said to me, we've got enough people doing ERCP and EUS, and I think you should make the colon your area. And so I did. And so he was a mentor to me. And also I have to give a lot of credit to Sid Winnower, because as I read, I read just everything I could put my, find about colonoscopy. And I viewed him as somebody who was actually trying to be a scientist about clinical aspects, because he had, with his colleagues, had designed the National Polyp Study, which was a randomized controlled trial. And I think that my time in the laboratory gave me some good foundation, in what's a controlled experiment and what isn't. So he was kind of a hero for me. And then Jerry Way, because when we would all go to the meetings, and every talk about colonoscopy would be given by Jerry Way, and he was so entertaining and wonderful. And I was like, these guys, I want to be like Jerry Way and Sid Winnower and my boss, Glenn Lehman.
I also remember what Mike Sivak said, who was also a good friend at that time. And he told me, he said to his students, the most influential procedure in gastroenterology ever is polypectomy.
Yeah.
So here you were.
He was right. And, I got into it at just the right time because in the 1980s, there was understandably a flurry of activity about H. pylori. When you would go to DDW, there would be thousands and thousands of abstracts about H. pylori in the stomach. And other than people like Sid, there were very few people who were trying to do research in colonoscopy. And I think a lot of people thought colonoscopy is really simple and straightforward. It's kind of sorted. Yeah. You just put the scope in there, you find a polyp, you take it out, it's over. And, so it was a really good opportunity because there weren't a lot of other people working at it. Dave Lieberman came along about the same time that I did, and he also was, starting to take a kind of scientific approach to different questions. And so it was good to kind of get out on the ground floor, and because now colonoscopy there's more interest in it. Still, a lot of things have been sorted, but we still have a lot of controversies, but we have. I do this journal scan thing for the ASGE, and I find 20 new papers on colonoscopy every week. And the people who are doing stomach have a hard time finding articles to write about.
Even ERCP, the pancreatic biliary guys, there hasn't been any huge progress.
Yeah.
Other than replacing ERCP by US or that kind of stuff, but the luminal side is progressing rapidly.
Right, and so it's still a good time. It was great to be on the ground floor of it.
But if you're mentoring younger people, it's at that time, colonoscopy, as you said, was not the focus. So, but you were still successful. What's required? Is it mentors? Is it studies? So, often you can define a plan afterwards. But what do you think the plan was?
Well, I think it's a good question because it does require a number of components. You have to be, I think, you have to be the right person. You have to understand the area completely, because I'm sure you've noticed over your career, anytime somebody asks you to give a talk about something that you haven't spoken about before, and you read a bunch of papers and you realize from doing that and becoming really knowing as much about the literature as anybody, that there are all these gaps, right? There are things that are assumed. So I think the first thing is to be a successful clinical person like that in terms of research, you have to recognize what the gaps are. And then you have to have the patient base for it, because a lot of people pick things that they're not really adapted very well to their practice. And I realized that colonoscopy was, I like doing it. I scope every day, and I do enormous amounts of it. So over the years, it was easy to, put lots of patients in trials, randomize, hundreds and many thousands of patients into a variety of trials, because I was doing it all day. And of course, you have to be able to write. You have to want to do it. You gotta spend the time of the nights and the weekends to look at. I think if you're a clinical researcher, there's nothing better than having good data and realizing, hey, we're going to put this together with a paper, and some good journal's going to be interested in this, because it's something new, and you have to be willing to write it. You got to be willing to, I think, work really hard and want it. So it's a variety of factors, and you got to have support, and somewhere you got to have support.
A team, huh?
Yeah, you got to have a team, and you got to have some money, because you got to pay your team, and that over the years has been a challenge, and because I usually would have at one time several drug-related trials. Oftentimes they were bowel preparation studies, so clinical trials that there was a profit from, and then also the university has to support you by letting you keep the profit, because some of them will take the profits from studies and do their own thing with it. But in our case, we were allowed to build up accounts, for research, and then I could take those and do investigator-initiated studies.
So it's kind of cross-financing.
Yeah, exactly. And then for quite a while, I had a benefactor. He was a patient. I'm terrible about asking patients. I think these institutions that make it into a science about, they just ask everybody who comes through, what can you give us and so on. I've never been this is a patient who just asked me. He said, I'm willing to give you money to help you support your research. And so he did that. He did that for a number of years, but yeah, that support comes. You have to build a team of people who are going to help you collect data and analyze it and keep big databases that get huge after periods of time and do them accurately. That's a real skill set, and all that requires money. You have to pay them.
Statisticians. Which
statisticians
extremely important.
And you either have to have one. I never had one in my group, but we have a good biostatistics department, but you have to pay for them again to give them your help on individual projects. So it's a complex thing, and I don't know that it's easier now than it used to be. I think if anything, it's gotten somewhat harder. I think the money from pharmaceutical trials and so on it's not as easy to get. It's not as profitable doing them, and so it's a challenge for young people, and but that was the basic structure of how I did it.
And also the methodological requirements have hugely increased. If you read a New England paper from the 90s, it's a joke against what's required nowadays.
Right.
Nobody spoke about intention to treat and per protocol. And that kind of stuff. So
yes.
I think that's a very important part of it.
And I
think it's adequately mirrored in the medical education, a clinical trial mindset and methodology.
I've gotten a little bit dissociated from what they're doing. They do have a fair amount of training in biostatistics, and of course now we have a number of our young fellows. We have them trained as masters in public health, and they learn, how to do these things. And that's really important because I don't have that training. Truthfully, I have had probably my greatest success from randomized controlled trials, which in many cases, they require the least amount of training, because the main thing is you structure it correctly.
The randomization makes it.
The randomization kind of takes care of it. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do a meta-analysis to say, I give people ideas for meta-analyses and they put my names on papers. I kind of think the meta-analysis thing is overdone a bit.
I couldn't agree more.
But nevertheless, there are people that do that, and they're widely cited, and I pay some attention to that, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do one of those. I'm not trained to do it. And many of these issues that you're alluding to about basic things, I feel kind of like a dinosaur when those kinds of things come up. But overall, it's been a successful path. But I do think that young people probably need more formal training in it than the kind of thing that I had or that you probably had.
Yeah, exactly. We did it by gut feeling and learning by doing. And,
exactly.
The hard way sometimes. Absolutely. But Doug, here you are from Indiana, small town, still Indiana University, but you are connected to the entire world. Isn't that a very important aspect of scientific and other cooperation as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely. And it's been a huge amount of fun. It's rewarding to associate with people with common interest, from all over the world, to collaborate with people from different centers. And I've had some wonderful groups of collaboration with regard to resection studies. When I started off, I was totally focused on detection. I thought the first problem we have to solve is the detection. But as I was going along, I was realizing that resection is just a joke. Everybody's just kind of doing whatever they did when they were in fellowship. And I really got to hand it to Michael Burke because I kind of feel like he really started to take a systematic approach, particularly to large polyps and to doing studies and to sorting different issues. And I honestly was kind of like, doggone it, I missed that boat. And we started this consortium in the US. It was partly like, we got to produce some studies about resection, or the Australians are going to do everything. And but that's been so much fun, to do that. And we've gotten some Canadian groups, and collaborating with Europeans, especially Cesare, Al Rapici. These have been really rewarding, and just traveling around and talking about it. It's kind of funny, really, when you have a passion or an interest in something, how long you'll talk about all the details of methodology and stuff. Yeah.
Well, sort of final question: what's the private Doug Rex doing, if there's any time left?
Yeah. So I have 3 children of my own, and I have 3 stepchildren, and I have 5 grandchildren. And so I do spend time with I'm fortunate to have all 5 of my grandchildren live in the area close to me. So when I have some free time, I do that. But I'm 70 years old. We're probably kind of in the same ballpark. I don't know exactly how old you are, Thomas, but
67.
Yeah. So when people at work all day long, everybody's asking me when I'm going to retire, and I'm very concerned about retiring, because this career has been both my work and also my hobby, because I've spent so much time on nights and weekends. Writing papers and so on, and I don't have enough other hobbies. I like to, in the U.S. now, a big fad is pickleball. I love pickleball. I'm not sure my knees can take it more than a few hours a week. And I love to ride. My wife and I have electric bikes, and we have a home on a lake in northern Indiana, close to where I grew up. So we go up there in the summertime, hang out with my friends, and we ride the boat around the little lake, and generally have a fun time. But none of those things is like a full-time job. Yeah. So I kind of want to keep working. It's hard, really, we have fantastic jobs, I think. And
we do.
We really do. And we enjoy them so much. So I think I would miss it to give it up. At some point I'll try to figure out a way to scale back. I'm sure that I should at some point, but not yet.
Again, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of dangerous to stop a job you love. But
right.
Anyway,
right.
Doug, that was a fantastic journey. I thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.